Welcome, friends, to episode 259 of Color of Magic, or Magic Gaming Podcast, where we talk about all types of issues that affect gamers at and away from their gaming tables and computers. I am your host, PowrDragn, and for 259 episodes, still got my main man, who we are very lucky to be dodging some hurricanes. Brian Sonic, how's it going, dude?
We about to hit a 260. We're about to hit new weight class. I don't know what
Yeah,
weight class is. That
exactly.
heavyweight, welter. I don't know what class that is, but like we're about
I
to
think
hit.
that's got to move you to heavyweight, right?
I would think so. I'm not even sure what the heavyweight cutoff is, but
I don't know. There's a lot of weight classes where there's like a 15-pound difference or something. So like
yeah,
I don't know anymore. And every organization seems to have a different thing for it.
also true. I saw it in the new boxing game, Undisputed. You actually, one thing you can do in career mode is you can actually get too fat and not make weight. So that's cool.
Oh, that's messed up. You bulk up too much and then you got to go cut weight. Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, or you have too many biscuits, like David
Yeah,
Wayans in Great White Hype.
that's
Which
true.
if y'all even kind of like boxing, you got to see Great White Hype. It's very underrated.
Yeah, that's a movie. I hadn't watched it in a while. I wonder how well that's aged. I'd have to go back and check it out.
I mean, anytime you got David Wayans, Jeff Goldblum, and Samuel L. Jackson, you're well on your way to a good movie.
That's also a crazy cast list too. When you say all those names together, that there ain't many that are going to be like that.
And I think that's the only one where Jeff Goldblum and Samuel have probably done something else together, but I think that's the only one with all three of them.
That's gotta be. I mean, if so, it can't be more than 2 or 3.
Or well, I get technically Samuel L. Jackson in Jurassic Park, but he wasn't Samuel L. Jackson yet.
That's true.
He was in it, but he was just
but
stuff
Damon
like,
Wayans wasn't in it though.
No,
just Goldblum. Well, all right. If y'all want to support the show, y'all know what you got to do. You got over to Color of MT. Oh, that's the wrong one. I got to go to patreon.com/shop. Almost had my stuff mixed up. Go over to Patreon. You can get a shout out, just like Arthur Min. Thank you so much for being a patron. And I don't think we could really do a show this week without talking about, I want to say the elephant in the room, but the storm in the air, realistically, is the hurricanes, man, because they have devastated a ton of stuff at this point. Much more than we anticipated, obviously, up and down the East Coast, North Carolina, in the Appalachian Mountains even, which, you never think you're going to have a hurricane in that area, which is crazy. And to be fair, like, politics aside, right? Everybody believes what they believe. One side's doing more work or not doing work, whatever. But you can't blame the people who live there for not being prepared, because they're in the mountains.
You don't expect a hurricane.
Yeah.
Or a flood, certainly.
I don't ever want to victim blame for natural disasters, but at least I get it. If you're just like, hey, you live in a hurricane zone, you should be prepared, whatever. People in the mountains, though, like, this isn't even a once every 100 year thing. From everything I can find, this is a once ever thing.
Yeah.
Right. This
has several people pointed out on social media, like, oh, then why didn't you do so? To be able to just pack, everything you need to get to wherever you got to go is a privilege. We were talking about, like, we'd literally have to probably go to Louisiana if something happened, to fit, because that's where our relatives are. They got places to stay. Oh, and it just happened a couple of days ago. I think the battery or something went out in the truck randomly. What if that happens at the same time? Where are you going?
And the reason I bring it up, because people are going, what does this have to do with gaming? Like, actually a lot, believe it or not. When you're talking about some of your games not being able to even be shipped, because literally roads are destroyed, factories are gone.
Or if, there's a tournament that was scheduled for any of those areas, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Because, this stuff has to be planned months to years in advance. You didn't know a hurricane was coming.
No, that's a great thing to bring up, because there's conventions that end up not being able to be run because the local stuff isn't even rebuilt, for starters. And then on top of it, your local economy is not even built enough that you get enough local attendees to justify doing the event. Right. So even that, like, big events as a whole end up getting canceled. And I was telling you this story off the air. Like, there was a gentleman I know who had a game store years ago. This had to have been, oh my gosh, probably around 2008, sometime in the early 2000s. But there was a year where, apparently it's going to be 2024. But there was a year where Florida got hit with 3 hurricanes almost back to back. I want to say there was like a less than a week between 2 of them, and maybe right over a week between the second and the third one. And they said by the time they went back after the second one, they were just looking at the devastation and said, like, we're just going to close up our shop.
Yeah.
Like, we're just going to move to Georgia. We're going to stay with family. It just because they'd already lived through a couple other ones, and they said we just can't do this. You
Well,
know,
yeah, who
like,
can afford, for most people, the number of times you can afford to rebuild your entire life from the ground up is probably not even one.
oh yeah, and they had done it twice, I think, at that point. And then they didn't even have time, in his words, to do all the inventory for the insurance purposes before the next storm was even hitting.
Yeah.
So they were just like, why are we even bothering? Like, we can't do this. And we as tabletop gamers have an even bigger issue because weather affects a lot of our stuff. You know, you start getting condensation even inside of the packaging for board games, everything swells and warps, right? Card games, if you just have that much moisture in the air, you start getting mildew on cards. So all your card, even if it's off the ground, all your card inventory starts getting bad. Right. So there's all kinds of issues that affect these businesses, and their inventory is worthless at that point in some cases. You know, like supplies, everything just wrecked. And it's terrible. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely other human needs that need to be dealt with first. Like, just get people in houses, get people food, water, like, totally understand that. But I think in one of the stories that kind of goes underneath, like a lot of businesses, not just gaming stores, is that some of them just can't recover, even with insurance. Like, you have to build everything all over again. Like, if you're talking about building, especially in our industry, you're talking about like collectibles.
Yeah.
You know, when you've hell, even if you have a video game store, right? Like, you have all those old Nintendo games and whatever else, like they're just worthless now. Like, you can't just go get those. You have to go source them. Some of these places have stuff they've collected, hell, if they've been open 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, magic card inventory that they've built up millions of cards over a decade plus. Like, you don't just replace that overnight. It's just gone. So even when you redo your businesses, they're not the same as they were when you left them before the storm. And that's if you can even get it up and running in time, right? Because you've got to do all the cleanup. You know, you got to come in, get all the stuff, all the mold and everything else done, rebuild stuff if you
You
own
got
the
to
building
hope
or not.
all your customers were able to come back. Because, like you said, there may be some people say, you know what? I'm not staying here anymore. Or I can't afford this. You might easily lose 2 or 3 of your best customers, either from them having to move or maybe they lost their job and they just can't afford the game for a little while.
No, that's another good point. I remember when Katrina happened in New Orleans, we had a lot of people from New Orleans that were bussed out to Texas just, as evacuation. And they ended up just staying there because they were like, we can't really go back. Everything's devastated in our neighborhoods or whatever.
Mhm.
So what would we even be going back for? And it was going to be costly. So they were just like, hell, we'll just stay here. And they just ended up getting jobs and renting places and staying in Texas. So players and people we used to only see, on the border or in Louisiana events were now just at all the Texas events because they were just like, ain't no reason to go back. And to be fair, I don't think after Katrina we even held an event. And it maybe not, maybe one in northern Louisiana at one point, but that was kind of it, because all the players, had to rebuild and everything else. So it was a tough time, man. I don't think people understand the long term ramifications that these storms can have, not just on people as individuals, but different communities, and the gaming community is no different. And that's hoping again that none of the major things you follow or are part of are even based in those areas. Because if so, they're mostly gone at this point,
Yeah.
right? If somebody had a game they were working on or a big organization that ran stuff from there, whatever, like, hell, I'd be surprised if you've even been able to communicate with them on any serious level for the last week, and rightfully so. They got to get themselves in order first. But man, it's tough. I feel for people because even I can tell you a lot of these shops already, like a lot of entrepreneurships, are on thin budgets, right? They have very small margin for error. Maybe they can get by for a month, 2 months, maybe even up to 4 or 5 months with bad sales or whatever. When you can make no sales for, hell, in some cases, 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year, depending on how long it takes you to move,
Yeah,
open
very
up another
very few
shop.
people have have that much to You got to be part of a chain at that point. Probably nobody that's an individual small business owner is going to have that.
Yeah, it's tough, man.
And even if you work for a chain, if they look at the numbers and say, well, it's just your area's out of money right now. Sorry, we're closing your store.
Yep, we'll give you some moving expenses. If
Yeah.
you want to pack you and the family up, we'll set you up somewhere else to reopen, but we ain't doing it back there. And then again, at that point, the community loses a store, right? So it's like it's a tough thing, man. But just with all of it being in the news and just seeing the devastation, I thought it was something we should at least address and mention because I don't think we ever really talk about how these affect different gaming communities or even the local gaming businesses. And it's rough, especially like I said, for a tabletop business where all your stuff practically is susceptible to the weather elements. Like it's a tough time. Though, on a little lighthearted note, I will say one of the things I saw that was interesting from this is people, believe it or not, were using Flex Seal to seal up stuff and it worked.
That's a lot of damage.
So now, obviously, in some cases, it went higher than anticipated and some of their
Yeah.
windows took damage or whatever. But the seals held up through the water. So,
There you go.
if there was ever an endorsement for Flex Seal,
Sometimes those crazy ads are legit.
yep. Also, I didn't know this, but apparently the Rivian electric vehicles are waterproof. So they found some that even if they'd floated away during the storm or whatever, they found them. They all you had to do is hop in and drive them. They were still able to be driven. No water inside, no damage. So
Well, that's awesome.
yeah, so some things at least I found out that were at least some good news to come out of that. But semi-related, let's go ahead and hop into the soapbox here. And again, I'm going to try not to get too political here because there's a lot of that already with false facts and stuff that are costing people time and money, as far as the hurricanes are related. But I experienced this last week where some people even came into a stream or sent me DMs or whatever related to the commander stuff specifically that's gone down over the last couple weeks. And none of the things they were saying were accurate. And I know so because I was part of those discussions. I was part of the commander advisory group. I was in the Discord. I know how things progressed on the final days. So I'm like, what makes you think, like, where are you getting your information? And the fact that people are just, and not just this, we see it all the time with a ton of things. But like, would you just state something as fact when you genuinely have nothing to base it on? Now, even here on this show, if there's something either of us are speculating on, we'll say, well, maybe this I'm assuming. Or, hey, this next part, this is just speculation, right? So that we're making our best guess, but we don't have hard evidence, right? Other stuff, we say, hey, I know this for these reasons. So you can know the difference as a listener or a viewer, right? Like, hey, this is food for thought when we're speculating. This is a fact you should know when it's something we know. But what's your benefit to going around and saying something as fact with nothing to back it up? That just seems to cause more problems for more people for no reason at all. Like we talked about, like if you were scamming somebody or whatever, all right, I don't agree with what you're doing, but at least there's a purpose. Hell, when you're just saying stuff, is it just to make yourself feel good? To feel like you know something and be part of the thing? Like I just don't get it. I literally had a conversation with somebody just this week who was being misled down this whole like magic finance rabbit hole by a person who was talking to them like they were an expert. And it turns out they didn't know a damn thing. like, and I was like, yo, hold on a second. We should probably address it because none of this sounds right. Like, here's what I know. and let me show you some things. And I'm just like, what do people like that gain, dude? Like, what's their benefit? Like,
Everybody wants to be the smartest person in the room or believe that they are. And many times, if they're not called on it, the Cliff Clavin syndrome, you did say something, and you're confident enough in it, some people will believe it.
man, it's just tough. I feel like, and maybe I've said this on the show before, but I feel like as a society, we have reached a point where ignorance is wrong. And there's nothing wrong with being ignorant on top. Ignorance just means you don't know about a thing yet, right? You don't have knowledge on a subject at hand. That's fine. Now, stupidity is a different thing because stupidity is you know and you still go do the dumb thing, right? Like that's a whole different thing. But there shouldn't be anything wrong with just not knowing a thing. Hell, that's how we learn stuff. Hell, we didn't all know how to tie our shoes, but we watched Sesame Street or whatever, and we tried 6 or 7 times. We finally figured it out, right? Now we know how to tie our shoes. You can only learn stuff by not knowing a thing and acknowledging it so you can find out. The weird thing to me is if you walk around, and don't be wrong, now, if you do have reasons to believe a thing, whether your source is incorrect or whatever, at least you're going, hey, I saw this here, I saw somebody say this, or I read this thing and I thought this was correct. But when I ask people and they're just like, oh, I don't know, I just assumed. And it's like, then why are you stating it as facts? Like you're admittingly you don't know. Like that's not good. Hell, and I imagine, as we talked about last week, that's probably how more extra threats and things and whatever happen to people because folks are out here saying things that just aren't true. Sending blame and vitriol at folks who don't even deserve it because you don't even know what you're talking about. Like, why are we putting people in these situations? And I get it on a level when, like, again, not to be too political, but you have no real relationship and realistically will probably never meet a bunch of these politicians that you're out saying stuff about or whatever. But on a community level, these are people that directly affect things around you, know people around you. You will probably run into them at events and things. You know what I mean? Like to just be out saying stuff about people is a little bit crazy, man. A little
People,
bit
the,
crazy.
the internet has removed so many people's shame, about being wrong. They're, it was Mike Tyson supposedly that said, social media's got a lot of people just feeling comfortable about running their mouth and not getting hit or punched in the mouth for it.
Yeah, that's true. I think he was the one that said that.
We just way
Yeah,
too comfortable with stuff. You just
I think you're right. It's just people have gotten comfortable being overtly wrong. And that's a crazy statement, but I
because a
mean, we
lot of
see
people
it.
aren't going to correct you. They either don't know or in many cases don't care about the thing you're yammering on about. Especially if it's something like, Magic the Gathering,
Oh, yeah,
Madden
yeah.
NFL, what have you. They're just ready for you to stop talking. Even if they know something's different, they're not going to correct you because you talk more and they're trying to get to the point in the conversation at which you stop talking. So they're not going to correct you.
Bro, you ain't lying. Like there are some people. And hell, man, let me tell you, when I had the shop, oh, there was a couple of those a week where somebody comes in telling some kind of story and it's all BS. Like the dude is like, well, I got 10 Black Lotuses at home or whatever, right? I don't give it. If you're not bringing them to sell them to me, like whatever, I don't care. Like I'm not correcting them. The dude says, well, I got my 10 Lotuses when they first came out in 1985. Like, hell, the game didn't even come out till 93, but I ain't going to say a damn thing. I'm just like, that's cool, man. Whatever. I got stuff to check in. I'm going to keep doing my job. Whatever. I ain't got time for this.
Yeah.
But it's just like those people are walking around,
I
right?
had
Just,
so many people trying to convince me, being in the quote unquote liberal media. I had somebody tell me, that somebody I worked with was they were an aspiring politician, and they were writing these stories to get their political career started. Like, no, the person you're talking about literally doesn't even know what city council district they live in. They are the least political person. They're writing these political stories because they get a check for it. Same reason I'm writing them. They don't. They are not into politics like that.
and see, and that's the sad part because if that person would have come to you and been like, hey, you write for the paper. Hey, does this person have this type of like political leaning or have this agenda or whatever? Then you could have just had a conversation about it, right?
No,
And you could
they
have
have
been like,
zero
no,
political leaning. Is
but
there a political interest, let alone any political leaning?
well, yeah, yeah. But because they didn't, they just read a thing and went, well, obviously they hate me and my political stuff or whatever. So this is the new narrative. And it's just like,
Yeah.
but it's not though. The same way that, you know, some of the RC sold off their cards or this is exactly what Wizards wanted them to do and blah blah blah. And it's like, no, none of this. Like what you're saying doesn't even make sense. like like what are we doing? Like, oh, well, how bad was the fight that y'all had and blah blah. I'm like, what are you talking about? There wasn't a fight. And they're like, oh well, you're not going to tell me that this and this and this didn't go down? Like, no, none of this happened like that. None, not at all. Like, where's this even coming from? Like, it's just mind numbing that people are walking around like that, man. It's crazy. And even when I think I know, if something comes out later and I'm like, oh, hey, we've made corrections on the show before. Like, hey, oh, hey, I found out this is this person's actual name. I attributed it to the wrong person. Or, oh, this didn't go down the way I thought. Like, after following up last week, we found out this. Just issue a correction. It ain't a big deal. Now we know, right? It's just like, man, it's crazy. I can't handle it though. I had to say something. Like, it's getting bad out here, man. It's getting bad. All right. On a different note, let's talk about what we learned because these are two kind of sad things, actually. So brace yourselves, people. What you got, Brian?
Yeah, part of the, I guess, ongoing fire over at Ubisoft regarding Assassin's Creed Shadows. If you listen to last week, you heard us talking about how there apparently are studies saying that multiplayer games are just the best way to go now, even though I think Hogwarts Legacy, which has no multiplayer component whatsoever, was the best selling game of the year last year. But yet now apparently Ubisoft had decided that they're going to cram some kind of co-op mode into Assassin's Creed Shadows, which, by the way, was supposed to release, I believe, this month. So it clearly is probably close to finished. Now we're going to go in after the fact. Well, if it's coming out this month, yeah, it pretty much had to be finished. Now we're going to go back into it and try to layer in the co-op mode that didn't exist before because multiplayer games are what's hot right now. By the way, Assassin's Creed tried multiplayer a few years ago, and it was as horrible as you would expect because they have no experience and no nothing in that venue. That's never been what the kind of game Assassin's Creed is.
Man, like I don't even know how you could do that, right? If you were already pushed back, what, 4 months or something, 5 months, and then you're like, hey, we're gonna add a whole different mode into the game. Are we gonna have to announce it's being pushed back for at least another 3 months? Because I can't see how that's gonna, unless it's just all after the fact. Like you just have the game come out and maybe it's a,
Or maybe it'll be DLC. Maybe they
yeah,
would
an
do it that
online mode
way.
or
That would
something.
give them enough time to figure that out. Because you'd have to
Yeah.
rebalance all the, because obviously all the fight scenes you've set up so far are for one person fighting 52 samurai ninja or whatever. Gonna be twice as easy if you've got two people in the same fight now. Or I don't know. I just this sounds like there's no way this game is gonna. If you were to make a checklist of all the things that can go wrong during a video game, Assassin's Creed Shadows is starting to have almost every one of them. They couldn't control the racist hate campaign that came up about people who suddenly decided they were, like you were talking about, people that everybody all of a sudden in the game community was an expert on Japanese history somehow. Just randomly. Everybody knew whether or not Yasuke was a samurai. Oh, by the way, Assassin's Creed has never, ever pretended it was historically accurate. It has aliens and alien technology and a machine you can plug into and learn all the kung fu that your great 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 grandfather knew. It's never been a historical document that's never reported to me.
I think, you know, because I did do a little bit of digging, and it seems like stuff connected to Assassin's Creed also isn't like a top seller and super popular like it used to be. And I'm wondering if maybe all of this in total is kind of like the beginning of that brand starting to die. Because we've seen stock prices dropping for Ubisoft because, a lot of stuff around Assassin's Creed isn't what it used to be, right? It's not the push. So I'm
Or at
wondering,
minimum, maybe you don't have to do one every year. That's what I
yeah,
think a lot of game series need to realize. As I said last week, part of the reason NCAA football, excuse me, EA Sports College Football, I think I did that last week too, because it's been 11 years. But part of the reason it's so good is because EA was forced to stop putting it out for over a decade. That's the only way EA is ever going to stop making the sports games because they absolutely were not allowed to for 11 years. So people had time to say, hey, what do we want to put in here that we've never had in here before? What can we improve? We have been begging Madden to do something where, hey, you take a year off, or maybe you just do kind of like a roster update for, let's say, $30. Everybody would buy that.
yeah.
And then in a couple of years, you come back and you really hit hard with Madden 28 or 20, but no, so
And,
too much money to be made.
and that's the interesting thing for any game, right? That would do yearly stuff. Like, what if it was just, say, like even Call of Duty? It's okay, cool. We're going to make a new weapons and new maps download pack. And that's all it's going to be for the year. Right. And like you're saying, 25, $30. That feels like that should still be profitable though, because you're not putting near as many employee hours into it, right? Way less development, way less, all that. So it seems like that would be a reasonable plan, but it's just not a thing that the companies do. Like once they have a franchise hit, they got to try to hit it every year, I guess.
Basically, until people quit handing you $70 every November, you're going to
Yeah.
keep taking. Or now, if you buy the collector's edition, it's easily $100.
Yeah. And the
and
crazy,
and X number of people are gonna keep another business model. Look at when's Grand Theft Auto 6 coming out? They making money. They don't care. They figured out how to do the online stuff and are keep making money from it. But when GTA 6 drops, you know it's gonna be good because they've had what at this point, I don't know,
hell,
10.
GTA 6 will be 10 years in the making or something
Yeah,
by the time it comes out.
exactly. So more people, I think, should try to figure out how to do the GT. And by the way, the game never died because they kept doing online. Then the GTA role play
Oh,
community
dude. That whole
came
role
out.
play thing still blows my mind with
Right?
GTA.
That's something that would have probably never happened if you were just cranking a game out every year. And make no mistake, if they did a Grand Theft Auto game every year, people would buy it, but the
Yeah.
quality would not be the same.
Yeah, maybe that's just what Assassin's Creed's dealing with. It's just the last few didn't hit. You lost some brand favor, and now you need a big one, right? And I don't know if they're gonna get it at this point. Because let's be real, you've already pushed this one back a couple times. Brand stuff isn't doing well. The stock isn't doing well. Like if this one doesn't sell, I mean, how do you even justify spending on making an immediate another one that's got to come out the same time next year?
The stockholders need more money. It's the same way they justify all these things.
I mean, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it
Because
is
it's
that
not just
simple.
Assassin's Creed. The Star Wars game didn't hit, and we
Yeah.
know how much it costs to get a Star Wars license. So they could be clean. They try to dig out of that hole for some couple of fiscal years.
You are not wrong, man. You are not wrong.
X Defiant apparently is circling the drain. So this is the three. It's not just Assassin's Creed. It's 3 or 4 things in a row that have not hit the way Ubisoft needs them to hit. There are rumors that the company might get bought out, and that gets
But it's like we said before, right? The last 2 or 3 years have been loaded with bangers. Like it doesn't matter what genre game you play, what system you play on, like everybody's got big things. So if you are putting out mediocre to subpar quality, nobody has to buy it because you're the big thing that's expected to be bought that year.
unless you're Call of Duty or Madden.
Yeah.
Their stuff is review proof
But
for the most
again, I
part.
think those are also like almost culturally ingrained communities that they're going to buy
Yeah,
it every year no matter what. Like I don't think Assassin's Creed was ever like that. Like there were people that liked it, but there weren't all these tournaments and message boards and all this stuff or whatever just for Assassin's Creed, right? So yeah, it's a tough one. That being said, I did say there were two things that were sad. There was a story that came out today, and this one, man, it's a little bit mind blowing that it happened, especially when you consider who it happened to. But apparently, Halle Berry was lied to. Actually, not just lied to, tricked.
Yeah,
Actually, to
hoodwinked.
yep, to be in the second X-Men movie, which is crazy that somebody would go to Halle Berry and pull this off. But as the story goes, this story got out, and I want to get the director's name right because he deserves some credit for this actually. But he ends up uh Vaughn, what the last name of the director, I can't remember his first name. Matthew Vaughn.
Matthew, I believe.
That's what it was.
He did the Kingsman series.
Yeah. So at some point, he's talking, I guess, with the producers and whatever, and they're in a room, and he's looking at a table going, "What's this?" Because he sees a thick stack of things and it's labeled X-Men, whatever. And they're like, "Oh, that's the fake script we sent to Holly Berry to get her to agree to do the movie." And he basically gave him the WTF.
And the
Right?
fake script apparently had a bunch of scenes and made Storm like she was going to be way
Oh
more
yeah.
important than where the Storm is summoning rain in Africa so children can drink water. None of that happened in the movie.
Which is crazy. Like, now, credit to Matthew Vaughn, because apparently after seeing that, he was like, I don't even want to be part of this. And that's why he ultimately left. So we thought, like, oh, there was a disagreement, he just left. No, it turns out he left because they were lying to the actors. And
Yeah, because they're
that's
doing that to Halle
bonkers.
Berry. You know they're not shooting straight with you or
Yeah.
anybody else. If they'll do that to an Oscar-winning actress, at that point, they're probably the biggest name in the movie, really.
Yeah.
And
Now,
that
that
was
being said, he eventually came back and did the third one, I think. But I like it's just crazy to me that somebody went through the effort of making a whole second script and then sent that to Holly Berry. It's like, no, you definitely want to come back. Like, we're gonna feature Storm, we're gonna do this, whatever. And she's like, all right, sounds good. Signs the contract. Toss that one in the trash, and you're like, okay, where go? Right?
they
Like,
did
hey,
so much
what?
crazy stuff to her. Because also, I found out, the poor Halle ended up getting stuck in one of the worst lines in movie history, where she kills Toad and says something along the lines of, "Do you know what happens to a toad when it gets struck by lightning?" You're waiting for this to be some cool action movie line, like I'll be something. The same thing that happens to everything else, and everybody's like, "What? That was really bad." Turns out,
Yeah.
apparently, there was stuff on there's left on the cutting room floor that would have made that make, because apparently, in the initial version, Ray Park had more dialogue, and he was saying all these things about, how a toad does this, how a toad does. So she was responding to his running gag, but they cut out
Okay.
all of his stuff that would have made that make sense, and just left a line that made her look really stupid.
Yeah. It's just crazy that that's a thing that happened. Like, because it's not even like they went, oh, well, let's just show her this other script that we have and let her pick one or whatever. It's like, you
No,
made
they
a
wrote a whole
script.
fake script that they had
Yeah,
no intention of ever using.
that's just bananas. But again, credit to Matthew Vaughn for just not wanting to be part of that whole deception. And
But you
apparently,
made a conscious choice not to feature the best known, and I think at that point the only Oscar nominated actor in the movie. I
oh,
don't
yeah,
know if Ian McKellen had his, but I don't think he had yet. I don't know. I
I
don't
would
believe
say
he had been.
also a thing to realize too at that point, outside of like Wolverine, it wasn't like there was another major X-Men to feature that the average fan's really going to be super excited about anyway. So you might as well feature Storm alongside Wolverine or something and turn it into a thing. But like, yeah, this is just more proof that we are lucky that Fox Studios is no longer in charge of X Men. Right? Like there's so many things that went wrong, so many things that were so close and missed the mark, and then we got that I don't know what you want to call type of movie they turned New Mutants into. That I don't. That's just a disaster. And we're seeing all the cool stuff going on with Sony. We see all the cool stuff going on with Disney, and we're like, okay, cool. Finally, we're gonna get to bring the X-Men in to be part of this other stuff, and we can kill all this noise.
Wait,
And
was there cool stuff going on at Sony? Did I miss the movies?
oh, I'm
Because
saying with like Spider-Man and Venom and all this other stuff they got happening. Like
and
they're
Morbius and Madam Web. So
oh no,
again, did I miss the
no,
movie?
they do. Don't get me wrong, they have some stinkers. Like they definitely have some in there. And we're about to get another one because they finally finished Craven, I think. So
That's
that
what I'm saying. Like I
yeah,
thought Sony had done something I
no,
hadn't
no,
heard about that was
no, no,
good.
no, no, no. That's still gonna go down. Like that's
Yeah.
still a thing.
The whole
But
plan of making movies based on the sinister, I think just movies based on the villain in general, because the latest Joker apparently is terrible.
yeah, I didn't even bother. I didn't see the first one either. I just don't find that interesting. I
See,
just don't.
we got to stop with these. We just got to stop.
Yeah, maybe this will be the sign, I think, for people to go, okay, if Joker ain't making it now with an actor that some people seem to really like in
Oh, I
Joaquin
mean,
Phoenix or
yeah,
whatever.
he's a good actor. I wouldn't even say that he did a bad job necessarily in the first Joker, but it
I'd have to
just
go back through because I don't like he's one of those people I think I accept as a decent actor, but I don't know if I like the stuff that he's in, which doesn't help. So I'm just like, not that excited to go see him. But there is somewhat of an interesting part to this whole story with Halle Berry. It sounds like there are some discussions, or at least have been, with Marvel Studios now saying, like, hey, if we wanted to bring you back in or have you be part of something, are you interested or not? Makes me wonder, though, and the writer of this article also points it out that this story might also be coming out. So if she does decide not to do it, the reasons and stuff are already out there and she doesn't have to
yeah,
defend it, and not
also
look bad or
true.
whatever. And to her credit, if she didn't want to do it, I wouldn't blame her. Like if you got a bad taste in your mouth after trying to get into superhero stuff and that's how you got treated, eh,
Plus,
you
at
know,
this point, while she obviously doesn't look it, I think Hallie is 58 years old. So it would probably be a bit because I'm sure they're going to cast a new Storm and just start the whole X-Men thing all the way over.
yeah, you'd have to. You'd
So if
have
she's
to.
in it, it'd probably be like Storm from another multiverse or something. It would probably end up being. Well, again, I don't know what they're
I
playing.
mean,
Maybe
I don't know. We're still doing multiple multiverse thing and some time stuff. So like maybe there's a future version of the X-Men where they can look a little older. Like,
that's
I don't know.
possible too.
Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, that was just a weird story to read. But yeah, we only have a couple of quick topics to cover, so let's hop into those. There, and kind of coming back to some of the hurricane stuff here, there are a lot of charity events happening, a lot of efforts. There was one being promoted on Twitter today by Praetors for Change, and they're going to have stuff going on this weekend, October 11 to the 13th. It'll be on their Twitch channel. And looks like they have a lot of different community members participating. There's going to be a 3-day commander stream. It says going to be a marathon, so I guess they're going to go all weekend. They're going to have a bunch of raffle prizes for donations and whatnot, and obviously, the money's going to go to All Hands and Hearts, so they can actually help people out in the problem areas with the hurricanes. I thought that was really cool to at least mention and bring up because people are trying to put together stuff on short notice to help people, and it's
Yeah,
if we can just get them a few more viewers or listeners, then,
absolutely.
I'm all for it because, man, devastation. It just sucks that people are going through what's probably going to be the worst thing that ever happens in their life next to a death of a family member. But here's another interesting thing. I guess talking about charities, I saw today, and I'm going to bring this up here. There's a secret layer tied to, um, what is it here? The Extra Life promotion. Now that's not that weird because they do that every year. They've done it for I don't know how long, feels like a decade now plus. But this year there were some interesting things I didn't know about. There's actually going to be a t-shirt, a playmat, a pin, and a sticker that apparently you're going to be able to get in the MTG Arena shop, which is pretty cool. So says here there's also going to be some cosmetics or whatever, but you'll be able to purchase gems and just use those as though it were just a regular item in the shop. And I guess they're going to mail it to you, so you can get t-shirt, playmat, whatever. And there's some pretty sweet art on these too if people want them. And it's kind of a big bright t-shirt and everything else. So yeah, kind of cool if you're interested in that stuff. or want to get some physical sleeves, I think are also going to think. No, that's a pixel art sleeve, so you don't get physical sleeves. But yeah, some cool stuff that's available, and they've never done that before. This is kind of like the first time that you've been able to actually shop and be part of the promotion right there on Arena, which is cool because in a way it's like, you know, part of the sales are going to go to the charity. So you're kind of still getting to donate a little bit in a way and get a little something for your efforts. So that's actually kind of cool for everybody. It's a win-win. If you feel like, well, I can't just give up money, but at least if I get a little bit of something, I'm still supporting a cause. Like, this is cool. So a couple of nice charities to talk about. But that brings us to the dinner table. And I don't know if I had if you had a good story for this, but the question today is, have there been any crazy emergency situations you've had to deal with while gaming or at a gaming event? Because if you don't have one, I have at least one story about a theft that happened in the middle of an event.
Oh yeah, let's go to that. That sounds way more interesting.
All right. Now, I will say, we've had small stuff, right? Like where power goes out for like 2 to 5 minutes. You know, everybody just turns their cell phones on and whatever, and it's no big deal. Like, I think maybe once power went out, and you know, you had to just close the business and send people outside, whatever. That's not that big a deal. But this particular event, we were running an event in Fort Worth, Texas at the Will Rogers Center, and we'd been there before. Okay, let me preface this as well to say the Yu-Gi-Oh community, if I literally made two piles and said, we'll put the Yu-Gi-Oh community in one hand, and we'll put literally every single other thing in the other thing. Every other event we've ran, participated in, judged, whatever, goes in another pile. I will have more threats, police reports, whatever, in the Yu-Gi-Oh pile. That's just the way it's always been. It just is what it is. I say that so this story won't sound like the most insane thing when it happens. Because we did already have the security's number and the police number because we've had to deal with them before when we run events. But anyway, so we're in the middle of this event. It's like round 3 or 4. We're just kind of, you know, pacing the room, checking, make sure everything's good. And out of the corner of my eye, I see a binder go across a couple of people to somebody else, and then a dude go running out the door. So I'm like, well, that's awkward. You know, like that's not a normal action. So
No.
you quickly go over, check it out. Apparently, one of the kids had his stuff stolen. His buddy threw it to another guy, and the guy went running with it. Now, the stupidity step one of this situation is the guy who threw it is still in the room. Right? So,
Yeah, his buddy stole something from him?
I guess I don't know. Here, oh, wait till I get to the finish. This is even dumber, right? So, the dude who initially grabbed the binder tossed it to a friend, and the friend ran. But the other dude is still here, right?
The quarterback, if you
Yeah.
will.
So I'm like, cool, this path's easy. So I literally just get my phone out, you know, dial the security and be like, hey, one, we need you to call the cops, look for this dude. This is what's happening. You probably just exit. The other is the other guy who threw it to him still here if you want to come detain him or whatever till the police are done. So he comes over. He's confused as I am. Like, how are you this stupid? But like, whatever. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm just telling you what I know. Right. So supposedly the cops end up chasing this other kid for like, I think they said like 3 or 4 blocks right before they got him. Cause he's like trying to go behind backyards or something or whatever. They eventually get him, get the stuff back. We don't see them for like 20 minutes or so. Cause they chase him down. They got to bring him back, all that. So the whole time I'm like, what did you think was going to happen? Cause I'm trying to talk to the other dude now, like sensibly, like, man,
Yeah.
what did you think was going to happen here? Right. Like, how did you get convinced that this was a good idea? And this is the most insane part of this whole thing. The kid who had the stuff stolen, I asked him, like, okay, do you know why they would have taken your stuff, or was it just like opportunistic you had it sitting out? He says, well, I don't know. I thought we're cool. He lives in the same neighborhood as my grandma. We know each other. And I'm like, wait, what? So the dude who stole, like, it wouldn't even be like he couldn't be identified. The guy knows exactly who he is. And I'm like, this is the worst thought out plan I have ever heard of for a theft. Like, this doesn't even make sense.
And we see a lot.
No, for real. I have a litany of
Yeah,
stories.
yeah, me and you, we probably covered some of the, or I've covered and you've seen some of the dumbest crimes.
So yeah, they bring the kid back. Apparently, they end up pressing charges, and it's a whole thing. But I'm just like, even if he would have got away, the dude
Yeah,
knows
you know,
literally where you live. Like, what is like of all the people to take stuff from in the room, why was that like I don't know. I like obviously theft is bad, criminals are stupid,
yeah,
but man, that was one of the worst ones on a stupidity level that we've had at an event. So yeah, that's at least a fun. So I don't know if we call that an emergency, but it's at least a fun story to
clearly an
share.
emergency for the person that got their stuff stolen, if not for anybody else.
So yeah, I think we can leave everybody on that. That's a maybe
Yeah.
it's dinner table which comes story time because I think we have a lot that we could share. But Brian, I want sure where they can find you on social media at
All right,
least.
I am Brian Sonic on Twitter and YouTube. You can read my writing over at GameSided.
And you can find me everywhere at PowrDragn, PowrDragn. Lots of stuff going up on YouTube. And I'm going to be down in Vegas in a couple of weeks. So if you want to find me, come say hi. And I'm going to have some cool new tokens to pass out. So you can get stuff just for coming and seeing me. But as always, wherever you are watching or listening, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Please remember to take care of yourselves and your family legitly right now because there is so much stuff going on. Remember to be awesome. And most importantly, because people need it right now, be awesome to each other.